Setting problems. Right. All right, folks, welcome. So, our learning path that we're doing today, learning path number 4. Have any of these things on? Yes, let's just go do a search for one. MD102. Lead. Lead. Okay, so learning path number execute device enrollment, configure profiles, and all that. Yesterday, examining application management. So this is the one we're on over here, MD102, examining application management. So fire up that one. And inside of there, we have got the following. So execute application management, deploy and update applications, administer endpoint applications. So three paths that we've got there. Just confirming that the guys on the Zoom call can hear me okay?
Yep, seems all right so far.
Fantastic. Okay, because I'm just doing it from my laptop today. I haven't done it through the online mics. In fact, I better turn off the online mic, otherwise that might cause some problems. Is this so just checking everyone can still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Cool. Right. And okay, and it's
but also wherever the device dimension, wherever the device here, 670, define, it doesn't have to come. Oh, really? I don't know. Oh, no, I didn't. Yeah, I just I gave up on that.
all right, guys, we are ready to rock and roll. So welcome back to day number 3. So starting with learning path number 4, examining application management. And we'll go through the theory of that now. We've got a couple of labs on that. And then we're going to talk about some security side of things. So we're going to talk about authentication, etc. So learning path 4 and learning path 5 is what we'll be covering off today. So in our learning path 4. Execute mobile application management, deploy and update applications, and administering endpoint applications. So in this section over here, we are going to be talking about MAM, mobile application management. What have we talked about so far? Well, yesterday we were talking about MDMs, mobile device management. So with an MDM, we are managing the device. The device is enrolled into our products, such as Intune, and we are managing the device. MAM takes a different approach. MAM says, regardless of whether the device is enrolled or not, what we can do is we can apply protection with the application that the user is using. So the protection goes with the application, regardless of whether the device is enrolled or not. That way, we could allow somebody to access our sensitive business data, even if we are not managing the device. So we'll see how that works. Then in this section here, we're going to look at applications, deploying and updating applications, and administering endpoint applications. So we're going to talk about the traditional way of doing things, and we're going to talk about how we can do it using Intune. Okay. Intune mobile application management can be used to publish, push, configure, secure, monitor, and update mobile apps. In other words, it's a suite of Intune features that allows us to control the system via the application the user is using rather than managing the device. Now, in order for that to work, the app needs to be built so that it can work with MAM. So it's something that's part of the application rather than something that we're doing through Intune as such. So it uses Microsoft Intune app protection policies to protect the data within an application for an application that is compliant with MAM. So what happens if you've got an application that doesn't have MAM built in? Well, we will see that we have got a couple of ways that we can add it to an application. Okay. So with our mobile device management, or our MDM, manages and protects the device. The MAM policies protect the data when a user is using a specific application. So scenarios being, we can have a device enrolled and still use MAM, or we can use MAM without enrollment. We can use MAM with devices that are enrolled in a third-party mobile application, mobile device management utility as well. So if you've got devices that are enrolled and you still want to use MAM policies, maybe you've got a MAM policy that's not as restrictive for devices that are enrolled, as opposed to devices that aren't enrolled. Maybe you're using a more restrictive policy for that because you're not controlling the actual device itself. Again, it just depends on how you wish to roll it out. As I mentioned over here with MAM, the device is not enrolled. So MAM without enrollment, the device is not enrolled. So we're not managing the device, but we're managing the data that the applications are accessing. So typically used there in a BYD device scenario. Now, importantly, they mentioned over here with the MAM policy that we're talking about here, adds protection policies to Android and iOS. So not for Windows computers. This is for Android and iOS computers. Windows is done slightly differently. With Windows, we use WIP, or Windows Information Protection. So we'll do WIP later on. Today, I think we'll be doing WIP. If not, we'll do it tomorrow morning. But here we're just talking about the protection policies for iOS and Android devices. So we will do a lab on it, where we go and configure a policy. We just can't test it, because obviously we don't have iOS and Android name systems to test it on. What are the sort of things we can do when we are using MAM. So with the Intune managed apps, we can do things like restrict, copy, and paste, restrict, save as. So what do we mean by that? Well, we can prevent a user, let's say the user is using Word, they're using Word from a work context, and they're now busy editing a work document. They go and copy some sensitive information in that in the Word document. They go and try and paste it into something else, one of their applications, a personal application, because they want to, I don't know, do something at home or make a copy of whatever. When they try and do that, they will be prevented from doing that. So we can prevent them from copying out of a protected document and pasting it into an application that's not being managed by us. Or save as, we can prevent them from saving a document to an area of storage that we don't control. So remember, when we're managing a device, what we could do is we could have an area of the device that is managed by the organization. So we're just wiping business data off the device. Well, in this case, we're not managing the device. So we can restrict them from actually saving anything on the device. We can configure web links to open inside the Intune Managed Browser app. So in other words, on a particular web link that might be used for business purposes, we can have that open up in our managed browser. And obviously our managed browser, then we have our various policies configured around that browser. We can enable multi-identity use and app-level conditional access. So we could be doing that conditional access at the app level. We can apply data loss prevention policies without managing the user's device, and we can also use it with third-party EMM tools. So they're using the newer name, Enterprise Mobility Management Tools. So that's a better name for MDM, because Enterprise Mobility Management sort of encompasses everything rather than just mobile devices. And with our Intune, it also has an app protection policy report listing all the apps that have MAM policies enabled. So there's some reporting capability in our Intune to go and view that as well. So as I mentioned, the application needs to be built to work with MAM. So what happens if it isn't? Well, there is the Intune app wrapping tool that we can use. So primarily for internal line of business applications. So it's a command line application. It creates a wrapper around the app, and we can then apply our policies once we have configured that wrapper around it. So we don't need the source code to use the tool, but we do need signing credentials. So I mentioned there, use the app wrapping tool when your app doesn't have built-in data protection features. It's a simple app deployed internally. The app wrapping tool is not supported with the Apple Google Store. And that's my response. Really having problems today. You don't have access to the app source code, or your app has minimal user authentication experiences. The other utility we've got is the Intune App SDK. So designed mainly for customers who have apps in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store and want to be able to manage the apps with Intune. So app wrapping tool, simpler app or simpler tool for simpler apps. Not supported with apps in the Play Stores, Google Play and the Apple Store. Intune App SDK for more complex apps and does support those in the store. For your Intune App SDK, you do need to have access to the source code. So those are your two options in the case that your app doesn't have the built-in policies. Okay, so as we mentioned, app protection policies can be applied to apps running on devices that may or may not be enrolled in Intune. In your student material, let's just jump onto that quickly. Protection policies. Here we go. So unfortunately, there are no slides for these little pictures in your student manual. But basically what they're showing over here is just a couple of images. First one over there, we've got apps without app restriction policy. So basically, in this scenario over here, here's your device. You're working with corporate data. You're working with personal data. There's no protection whatsoever. Your corporate data could be saved into the personal space, onto your device storage, and potentially there could be data loss as a result, data leaked from the organization, etc. So that's obviously not a good situation. You wouldn't normally want to do that. So what we could do is, if we're not managing the device, we can go and add MAM policies. So this is showing data protection with app protection policies. So I've defined my app protection policies. So there's my corporate workspace separated from the personal workspace. So when a user is using one of these applications from a business perspective, my MAM policies will apply. We call these enlightened apps. Enlightened apps because they know when the user is using it from a business perspective, as opposed to when they're using it from a personal perspective. So when they're using it from a personal perspective, the MAM policies won't apply. So what do we mean by enlightened? Well, generally, it's if you are working with business content, because you are accessing it using corporate credentials, it'll be protected. Or if you're accessing your personal stuff using your own personal credentials, it's not protected with MAM policies. And then they're showing this one over here, where we both have MDM together with MAM policies. So that's another possibility where we're both managing the device, either in tune or third party, and also have some MAM policies around the actual applications. So those are the various options available there. Now, one of the things they mentioned that we can protect, or one of the things we can check, is we can have access policies that might require things like a simple PIN for access, blocking managed apps from running on jailbroken or rooted devices. So what do they mean by jailbroken or rooted device? With an Android device, what a user can do is they can root the device. What we mean by rooting an Android device, Android is built on Linux, and your root user is your administrator in Linux. So by rooting a device, what you're doing is you're bypassing the built-in protection on the device, and you're getting root level privileges. In other words, you're getting administrative privileges on that device. So why would we want to prevent a rooted device from accessing our corporate data? Well, if it's been rooted, in other words, you have got root access to it, well, potentially there could be malware on the device that also could have root access. A device that's got malware running at root level permissions means it could bypass your various security that you've set up on that device. So if the device has been rooted, you may not want to allow it to access your sensitive corporate data. As opposed to that, on an Apple device, we talk about it as being jailbroken. So in Apple, they create this jail that you work in, and in order to get out of the jail and do other stuff on your Apple device, you have to break out of your jail. It's the same concept. Breaking out of your jail in Apple means you've got administrative access on the device itself. Okay. So that's what they're talking about when they're talking about a jailbroken or a rooted device. So looking at some of the app protections, so they just mentioned there at the bottom of that section in your student book, the app protection policies add value by helping protect company data from leaking to consumer apps and services, applying restrictions like save as, clipboard, pin, client apps, etc. So you can't copy stuff across to another app, as we mentioned earlier. and also wiping company data from apps without removing those apps from the device. How do we implement our mobile application management policies in Intune? So the app protection policies can be applied to apps running on devices that may or may not be enrolled in Intune. A little bit of repetition there. Intune app protection policies are assigned to users. Who can tell me, why do we assign Intune app protection policies to users? Why don't I assign it to a device?
Device is not managed by the.
Exactly right. The device is not managed. So how can I assign a policy to something that I'm not managing? So the app protection policies will be assigned to users, and again, can only be assigned to Android and iOS. There is a little bit of repetition in these slides. Monitor the app compliance status in our Azure portal. I think this slide, even though this is now the new course, they haven't updated the slide. What that should actually say is the Intune portal. Why it says the Azure portal is because Intune used to be in Azure about 3 years ago. That's how long ago they updated the slide. Okay, so that should say Intune then. So provide summary, detailed, and reporting views of your app protection. So you'll see things like assigned users, you've got the app policies, apps that have got the man policies, top protected apps, users experience issues, and the check-in status. And you also can go through and run user or app reports. What happens if you go and edit an existing policy? So you can go and edit existing policies. If it has already been targeted to a user, remembering that when you change an existing policy, users already signed in to the app, they may not see those changes for an 8-hour period. So that 8-hour period is simply when they might sync back up. So if you want to see the effects immediately, the user needs to sign out of that app and sign back into the app. Okay, so
David, a quick question on this.
yeah.
On MAM. So it's pretty much the idea is to give them access to our company portal via Intune. So they will go and install a company portal, you know, the way you can install in Android and Apple. Because those devices may not be maintained, they will authenticate against their Azure account.
Is that Tej talking?
Tej, yeah. Tej.
Tej, this isn't about installing applications. This is using an application to access business content.
So to get to that phase where they can use an application or they can view the application, the way we will present the application, or is that via Intune portal or something? Isn't
you
it
could
like
do that through the company portal? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So and it's pretty much like if I was trying to understand this as a concept. So is it pretty much like you know, the way we give access to Citrix, where they can go to a web link and they can, you know, they can see multiple applications within Citrix portal. Is this how can we, you know, sync with a similar concept? Is what is okay?
Yeah, absolutely. You can also make applications available for Azure through Azure as well. So with Azure, I think it is My Apps. Got your company portal. Yep.
We are already doing that from Intune point. It looks very interesting. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So absolutely right. Any other questions? Okay, so what else can we see? I'm going to just jump onto this because these slides are really clear over here. This is the end of the slideshow, but there's still some more information in your student book. So just scroll further down here. Just want to show you some things. And just on there. Okay, here we go. So this is just showing us our reporting that we've got here. So summary view. You know, Intune Admin Center, we can see over there I've got a number of apps there managed by the system. So 3 managed by policy, 1 doesn't have a policy. So 3 have got MAM policies applied, 1 doesn't have a MAM policy on it. My detailed view. So to get to the detailed view again, that's a link. Just click on this and that'll take you into further detail on those 4 applications that are there. You can search for a single user, check the compliance status for that user. So again, over here, Microsoft Intune Admin Center, apps monitor app protection status, user status for iOS or user status for Android. And then you'll see things like checked in, policy was deployed to the user, app was used in a work context at least once, or not checked in. So policy was deployed to the user, but the app hasn't been used in the work context since then. And then they're just talking about the reporting view, where you can go and get a user report, app report, user configuration report, and app configuration report. So that's the reporting capability around your MAM in your Intune. That's the user app reports that they're talking about there. Okay, so that is MAM. Let us go and have a look at deploying and updating applications. So what are we going to talk about over here? We're going to look at deploying applications with Intune, adding apps to Intune, managing Win32 apps with Intune. So this is something new that they built into Intune. When I say new, relatively new. So we can actually manage the older desktop style apps rather than new Universal Windows Platform apps. So Universal Windows Platform apps supported by Intune all along. But the desktop apps weren't really. So just a little bit of history behind that. As I mentioned earlier on in the week, Intune was a third-party product that Microsoft bought out. At the time when they bought it out, it supported Windows 7 and, Windows 7 2008.2 back then. So it supported Windows 7. And of course, there was no Universal Windows Platform apps then. So the way it worked is we're similar to System Center in that you installed a client on the Windows 7 computer, and that talked to your Intune, and you were able to manage the Win32 apps, etc. When Windows 8 came out, Windows 8 didn't need the client installed on it, so Microsoft had done development in the back-end OS to work with Intune without a client. However, if you wanted it to manage Win32 apps, you needed to install the client on the Windows 8 computer. They then made some updates to Intune, and they built compatibility into Intune so that you could manage some Win32 apps with Intune, and that's what we'll have a look at over here. Having done that, there was no need for the client anymore. As well as that, Windows 7 was retired, so it was no longer a supported product, and they have removed that client. So we don't have the client anymore that you would need to install to manage your Win32 apps. Instead, they have built the capability to modify a Win32 app so that you can deploy it and manage it natively through Intune. Okay. So we'll have a look and see how that works. Now we're also going to look at traditional stuff over here. So deploying applications with Config Manager, deploying applications with group policy. This is assigning and publishing through group policy. For some reason, they've still got the Microsoft Store for Business stuff here. So the Microsoft Store for Business was deprecated in March, April this year. But I think Microsoft's having trouble deprecating it and getting rid of it. So it's hanging on there still. Their idea was they were going to build this capability into Intune, but it seems that, yeah, things haven't quite gone as they planned. So they've still got this in here. We're still going to talk about it a little bit. And but I think they've removed the lab because the lab doesn't work anymore anyway. So
Will we be doing Microsoft Store?
yeah, so this is the Microsoft Store for Business, which is different to the Microsoft Store. Microsoft Store is there and it's still going to stay. So that's not being deprecated. It's the Microsoft Store for Business that has been deprecated.
Yeah, but to replace that business content, are we looking at Microsoft Store?
No, Microsoft Store is the general store. The idea behind the Microsoft Store for Business is your personal line of business apps that you have developed. you could deploy to your staff and that through the Microsoft Store for Business. So you wouldn't necessarily put that up into the general public store.
Yeah.
But you could also purchase apps from the Microsoft Store, place them into your business store, and then make them available to your employees. But they've done away with that concept, and they're building the how would I word that? They're building that functionality into Intune and Config Manager. So the idea is that we'll be able to do that through Config Manager and Intune. Well, that's the idea. Okay. And then the second or the third module in this learning path will cover off more detail around Intune for application deployment. Okay, so what can we do with Intune? Well, we can add the app to Intune. So the first part of it is obviously adding the application to Intune so that Intune can deploy it and manage it. Now, the advantage of Intune is it can work with many different app types. So we're not just talking Windows apps. Could be Android, could be iOS, etc. That then goes on to our deployment, assigning it to users and or devices that we manage. Monitoring the success of the deployment, so we do that from our Intune, from our Endpoint Manager Admin Center. And also for some apps in the stores, we can purchase a bulk license and then deploy those through Intune. So they talk there in this June book, I think it says some app stores such as Apple and Windows app stores, you can purchase app licenses in bulk for your company, and Intune can synchronize data with those stores so that you can deploy and track license usage. So what we did from a Windows perspective is that's where the Windows Store for Business came in. So we track the license in that through Windows Store for Business. So I think their idea is that they're going to move that functionality into Intune as well, so you can do it for the Windows Store as well as the Android and Apple stores. Configuration. So tools where you can update your apps to newer versions, through the app lifecycle, various configuration that might need to be done. Managing browser policies to configure settings for an Intune managed browser, etc. Protection. So controls to access email and other services based on conditions that you specify. Also adding those protection policies that we spoke about in the previous lesson. So those MAM policies restricting copying data between unmanaged apps and managed apps, preventing apps from running on devices that have been jailbroken or rooted. So that's all that protection side of things there. And then finally, apps no longer going to be used anymore, we retire it from service. So all of that can be managed from our Intune. Of course, the app must be added to Intune before we can deploy and manage it. So what sort of apps can we add to Intune? Store apps, Microsoft, Apple, and Google. Okay. Microsoft 365 apps. So we can assign Microsoft 365 apps to Windows and Mac OS. So these are our traditional Microsoft 365 apps. We can also install apps for Project Online, Desktop Client, and Microsoft Visio Pro if we have got licenses for those. Web links. So basically, to have a web link open up inside a managed browser. So the web link is just a web link, but what it's doing, it's opening up in our managed Intune browser. Built-in apps. What do they mean by built-in apps? So that is for what they call curated managed apps. So things like Microsoft 365 apps to iOS and Android devices. So those are our lightweight Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneDrive, etc., that you can use from a web-based perspective. So we don't install it on the computer; it's being used from a web-based perspective. So we can assign those. They appear as either built-in iOS app or built-in Android app, and we can choose which of those apps to publish to device users. Line of business apps, app that we add from an app installation file, And again, it supports a whole bunch of different line of business app types. So it could be a Windows, MSI, Windows APPX or APPX bundle. So those are the new Universal Windows Platform apps, Android.apks, iOS, RPA, and Intune Mac. And then this new capability to also manage the Win32 apps, so the older desktop style apps. Okay, so administrators can use Intune to deploy most of the organization's existing Win32 line of business apps. Why do they say most of the Win32 apps? Well, there are some limitations around the Win32 apps that are supported. So, what are our limitations? In order to deploy Win32 apps, you must be running Windows 10 version 1607 or later, Enterprise, Pro, and Education versions. That shouldn't be a problem. 1607 is ages ago. Devices must be joined to Azure AD and auto-enrolled. And the maximum size supported is 8 GB. So what happens if you've got an app that's bigger than 8 GB? So this is where our app tool comes in. So what we have to do is you have to use this Win32 content preparation tool, where you go through and configure the app into what's called an Intune Win file, and your Intune Win file must be smaller than 8 GB in order for it to work, or 8 GB or less. Now, it is possible that you have a Win32 app that is bigger than that. You can talk to Microsoft, and they might lift that limit for you. I've heard of customers who have done that, so they have had that raised to a larger size than 8 GB. But by default, it supports 8 GB. Now, I think there is a chart in your student book just showing you the overall process. So let's just see back. Okay, so we're in this learning part. Let's go to File Update Applications. Win32 apps with Intune. There we go. There's our little flowchart. So it's showing you that little flowchart over there. So gather media, validate the command for install and uninstall, create your Intune Win file. Is it less than 8 GB? No. Clean up media size, reduce file size. Continue. If you cannot get it less than 8 GB, your solution will not meet your requirements. Having said that, as I said, if you can't get less than 8 GB, maybe you can talk to Microsoft. Maybe they can lift that limit for you. Okay. Specify the source installer folder, set a file to run, and the output folder for your .intune Win file. Okay, so the Intune Win app util. So this is the tool. It's a command line tool that we use to compress our Win32 app into a something.intune Win file. So what do we need to know? Well, we need to know the folder. So what do I mean by the folder? So the folder where our installation files reside. We need to know what the actual install file is and where we're going to output our Intune Win file to. So for example, Intune Win app util. There is my folder containing my application. I think there's a mistake over here with this double slash. What happens often when they actually write these textbooks, the backslash is seen as a control character, so we have to escape it. And I think what they've done is they've done escape here when they didn't need to. But yeah, it should just be a single slash over there. So that is my folder. In my install file, there it is there. Install file, setup.exe in that case. And what is my output folder? There's my output folder being test output version 1.0. So that's where my Intune Win file folder will end up. Now, of course, once we have created that Intune Win file, we then need to go and add it to Intune. And from there, we just manage it like any other app that we manage through Intune. Now, I've heard of some people who have deployed AutoCAD using Intune. Who knows how big AutoCAD is? It's a lot bigger than 8 gigabyte. They've done that by using scripting. So just letting you know, you can pretty much do anything if you because we know that we can do scripting with Intune. So yeah, we can pretty much do anything. So yes.
Would AutoCAD be WP by now?
They deploy the AutoCAD executable, but yeah, well, there's newer versions of that now. This was some years back.
Are app developers still developing with those two apps?
I probably wouldn't do it if I was a developer today, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but eventually they'll probably not be supported anymore. So yeah. Okay, so that's just a little bit about what's supported with Intune. What about Config Manager? So Config Manager, my applications, deploying applications through Config Manager. So Config Manager can do lots and lots of stuff. Here we're just focusing on the application deployment side of Config Manager. So from the perspective of Config Manager, so while we talk about an application or app, and it's quite a well-used computing term, from the perspective of Config Manager, it means something quite specific. So when we talk about an application from a configuration manager perspective, we can think of the application as a box where the box contains one or more sets of installation files for a software package, along with the instructions on how to deploy that software. And that's because I can have different boxes to deploy applications in slightly different ways, although it's the same application that's being deployed. So in our Config Manager, okay, so my requirements. Decide which deployment type configuration manager will install on the device. My deployment type. Let's start off based on the way they're listed there in your student book. So my deployment type, the set of contents in the box. So the application needs at least one deployment type, which determines how to install the app. You can use more than one deployment type to configure different content and installation programs for the same application. So that's what they mean there about, you can think of it as a box. So the deployment type is deploying this box, the set of contents in the box. My requirements. So that ensures the target endpoint is installed with the most appropriate application. Operating system, Windows x64, whatever it is. Global conditions. So that can be used alongside our requirements to predefine or specify custom requirements. We can do a simulated deployment. In other words, what we're doing is we're simulating installation of the application. We're not actually installing it, but we'll get a report back, on any issues, any dependencies, etc. So we get a report on the expected result. So I might do that as a test initially. That should say deployment action. That specifies whether you want to install or uninstall the application. Purpose. So whether the deployment app is required, in which case the client will be installed based on a schedule, or if it's available. So if you make it available, then that user just logs into the software center from Config Manager. So just go to their control panel and go to the software center, and they can then choose to install the application. So in our upcoming lab, we're going to use Config Manager to deploy an application to the users, and they'll basically install it from that software center. Revisions, if we make changes to the application, creates a revision so that we can track our changes. Detection method, so that config manager can know, or it can discover whether the device already has the application installed. Any dependencies, so we can define any dependencies on other deployments that might be required before this one is installed. A supersedence relationship, so we can use config manager to upgrade or replace an existing application. So we can do that using a supersedence relationship. And then application groups. So from version 1906 of config manager, they added in the capability to use an application group to deploy a group of applications to a user or device collection. So previously we did this by using task sequences to perform the complex dependency setup. It's much easier doing it using the application groups. So we could still do it in the past, but yeah, it was application groups just make it easier. Okay, so that's our config manager. What about our group policy? So group policy we can also use to deploy I'm just looking at the next slide of there. I'm just wondering if these slides are out of order because anyway, we'll see it. Group policy is built in to our system, so we don't have to worry about any extra costs or anything like that. So it's part of our ADDS. We don't need any client installed on their computers for group policy to work. Easier to use, relatively fast deployment. Well, what do they mean by easier to use? Well, we just add the application to group policy to deploy to the targeted devices or targeted users, and off it goes and does it. Problem is, though, minimal features. There's no reporting or success failure. I think I heard some people mentioning earlier on in the week, no reporting from group policies. What's going on? And it also only supports MSI packages. So if you've got an executable, you need to repackage it into an MSI in order for you to be able to deploy it using group policy. Anybody here use group policy to deploy apps?
Many years ago.
Yeah, many years ago. Yeah. So mostly what I find is organizations have got config manager and they've used config manager rather than group policy. But I've also seen some organizations that have config manager and still deploy certain things through group policy. So yeah. If you are a customer who doesn't have config manager, a smaller business, then this might be a good option. But this isn't something that we do all that often. So with group policy, we can assign software to a computer. So when I assign software to a computer, that means the first time the computer is rebooted after we have assigned it through the group policy, that application will be installed on that computer. Anybody who logs onto that computer will be able to use it. Or I could assign software to a user. So the difference with assigning software to a computer as opposed to a user is when we assign it to a user, when the user logs into that computer for the first time after it's been assigned to them, it'll be installed, but just for that user. If another user logs onto the same computer, but doesn't have it assigned to them, even though it's installed on that computer, hasn't been assigned to them, they wouldn't be able to use it. The other way we could do it with users, though, we could publish it to them rather than assigning it to them. If I publish it to a user, it doesn't install automatically. The user goes to the add remove programs and can add it from there. Or we could do it through what's called extension activation. So what do we mean by extension activation? Well, with extension activation, what happens is, the user might get, let's use Word as an example. I've published Word to the user through group policy with extension activation. They get an email with a Word document attached to it. It looks like a Word document. It's got the little Word icon, etc. They click on the document to open it. First time they open up a Word document, it installs Word. After that is installed, they don't have to install it again. So that's what we mean by extension activation. Okay, that's our group policy. Microsoft Store for Business. Retirement of the Microsoft Store for Business and the Microsoft Store for Education, originally scheduled for March 31, 2023, has been postponed. The process of removing support from Microsoft Store for Business and Education Experience in Intune is already in progress and will continue as scheduled. So they have left it in the content because they haven't quite managed to get rid of it yet. But it's going. It's been going for years. Okay. They talk there about what are the improvements of the Microsoft Store apps over legacy functionality. We can browse and search for store apps within Intune. We can monitor the installation progress and results for store apps. Win32 store apps are supported. That's in preview. And system context and user context are supported for universal Windows platform apps. So admins can browse, deploy, and monitor Microsoft Store applications inside Intune. So these are the new things that they've added to Intune. They can manage multiple versions of the same app, ensure app compatibility with different devices, and manage licenses for each app. So to add and deploy Microsoft Store app, we add an app from Microsoft Store, search the Microsoft Store, create the assignments, review, and create. We're going to be doing this in the upcoming lab, so we can go and install some applications from the Microsoft Store through Intune. So we'll see how we do that in the lab. We can update Microsoft Store apps with Intune. So apps that are deployed from the Microsoft Store are automatically kept up to date to the latest version. And this is done through what we call online licensing. So those apps have an online license and will automatically get updated when the updates happen. Microsoft Store Win32 apps. So when a Win32 app is published to a device as required but already installed, Intune will take over the management of the application. For Win32 and Universal Windows Platform apps, users must select install in the company portal before Intune takes over the management of the application. Universal Windows Platform apps may be installed in either user or system context. And store group policy restrictions, so may be used to control our app deployment scenarios. How can we assign apps? So assigning apps to our company employees. So the application is added to Microsoft Intune, and from there we can go and assign it to either a user or a device. So we can deploy an app to a device, whether or not the device is managed by Intune. So if I've assigned it to a user, then the user would be able to install it on their own device. That's what they mean by that. So this is a bit of a summary slide there of what we can do. So we can, let's just go back to that section there. Okay, assign to users. So regardless whether the device is enrolled or not, we can assign it to a user. Assign it to a device. Well, we can't assign a device if the device is not enrolled with Intune. Okay, can't assign to a device. Can only assign to a device if it's enrolled in Intune. So yes and no. No foil, not enrolled. Assign a wrapped app or app that incorporates the Intune SDK. Assign apps is available. So what are they saying over here? Assign a wrapped app or apps that incorporate the Intune SDK. Assign apps is available. A device not enrolled with Intune. So what are the meaning of here? Well, we're assigning an app is available. It's available to users or available to devices. Okay, so that's why there's a yes over there and a yes over here. Assign app as required. So what's the difference between available and required? Well, if I'm saying it's available, sure. If you're enrolled, it's available to you. If you're not enrolled, it's still available to you. Required means you have to have it. How would I know that you've got it if your device is not enrolled? I wouldn't. So that's why it's a yes, no over there. Okay, so the device has to be enrolled for that. To uninstall an app, in other words, through Intune, if I specify the app must be uninstalled, well, obviously I must be controlling the device, so it needs to be enrolled. Not enrolled, I can't uninstall it. Receive app updates from Intune. That can only happen if we know what's on their device. End user install available apps from the company portal app. I think this is incorrect. It should be yes, yes. And end users install available apps from web-based company portal app. So using the company portal app, they can still enroll even if it's still install even if it's not enrolled. Okay, so that's various app stuff that we can do there. Let's go and have a look at administering endpoint applications. So here we're focusing really on what Intune could do from an application perspective. So managing apps with Intune, managing apps on non-enrolled devices, deploying Microsoft 365 apps with Intune, additional 365 apps deployment tools, and then there's a section there we talk about Microsoft Edge with the new Internet Explorer mode. And we have a look at how we can go through and review our app inventory through Intune. So in managing our apps with Intune, first thing, of course, is the app supported? So make sure that Intune supports the application installation type and that the application can be installed without user intervention. Create a Azure AD group, either for a user or a device, depending on how you want to deploy the application. We need to add the application to Intune, for Intune to be able to deploy it. Assign it to the group that we created. And when we do the assignment, one of the things that we can do when we assign it to a group is the application category. Or at least when we, sorry, not when we assign it to a group, when we add the app to Intune. So when we add the app to Intune, the assignment category, if we're adding a number of apps, it's a good idea that we place those apps into certain categories. It makes it easier for users to go and find apps. There are already 9 categories built in. But if those 9 categories aren't good enough for you, you can go and make your own category. So we can create our own categories. Just go to apps, app categories, other, add, and create your own category. Give it whatever name you want. Okay, assigning the apps. So what can we do in the assignments tab? Well, all those various things we saw in that previous spreadsheet. So available, make it available to the users. They can install it through the company portal. Required app. Remember, required app means we must be managing the device, so we can check and see that it has been installed or not. Uninstall, again, it's been managing the device. Available for unenrolled devices or available for enrolled devices, etc., etc. And then they got, I think, a table in your student book over there, which was the table we saw earlier. From there, configure any other policies and monitor your various results. See how your deployment is going. The managing apps on non-enrolled devices. A managed app, one that Intune controls, control over the distribution and management. Unmanaged app, one that it doesn't control. So what do they mean by that? Well, where somebody goes and installs something directly from a public store. If you go and install something directly from a public store, you'll be using your Microsoft account to do that, not your Azure AD account. So that's being done from a personal context, basically. I mentioned there we can assign apps to unenrolled iOS and Android devices. Use either the company portal app or go to the Intune company portal website at portal.manage.microsoft.com to install apps on unenrolled devices. It's a little bit confusing as to what they're saying over there. You can assign apps to unenrolled iOS and Android devices. You're not assigning the app to the unenrolled device. You're assigning the app to the user. So Yeah, you're signing up to a user who can install it on an unenrolled iOS and Android device. It's just not not very good English that they've used there. And you can manage apps on an unenrolled device using an app protection policy. What are they talking about over here? What is an app protection policy? Good. Excellent. That's our MAM policy that we spoke about earlier on. So MAM policies, remember, iOS and Android. What are my other app protection policies we got for Windows? It's my WIP, my Windows Information Protection, which we'll talk about
WIP,
later.
is it?
WIP, yes, it is WIP. Deploying Microsoft 365 apps.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
So if we have implemented app protection policy for an app,
Yes.
that means we may not be able to install that on a non-enrolled devices then, right? If we have said that in the policy.
No, so that's slightly different. For when we talk about MAM, the specific purpose of using MAM is that we are doing it. So say you might have a MAM policy that you apply to an enrolled device, a different MAM policy that you apply to an enrolled device, as opposed to another MAM policy that you have for unenrolled devices. So you might do something like that. But generally the MAM policy is around the protections around that app so that they can't use save as, copy paste, etc. So it's not so much that they can't use the app on an unenrolled device. It might be that you've got a stricter MAM policy for an unenrolled device and a less strict one for an enrolled device. But it's not that they cannot use it. So generally, when we say they cannot access the application unless the device is enrolled, that is a compliance policy, which we'll talk about.
And the MAM policy can be applied to devices as well as the users, correct?
Correct. So MAM can be used with or without enrollment. So generally the MAM policy is applied to the user. So it can be used with or without enrollment. But if it's a MAM policy that you want to apply to an enrolled device, then you could do it to a device group, yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, the Microsoft 365 apps. So what are those? Well, those are the apps that we can install either on Windows or Mac OS. Now notice that it says you can deploy Microsoft 365 apps directly from Intune. So there's no need to download the installation files. They already exist in Intune. So they're already there in Intune, and we can deploy them to Windows and Mac OS computers as long as we've got the licenses for them, of course. So we use the Microsoft 365 apps app type and supports both 32 and 64-bit versions. We are going to be doing this in the upcoming lab. We're going to add some Microsoft 365 stuff to, I think it's WS1. Just bear in mind when you do this lab, it takes a long time for the Microsoft 365 app to actually install on the computer. You'll find that, or I'll find that some students in the class it'll have installed and everything's all good. Others of you, nothing will have installed. And only later this afternoon you might see it, or maybe tomorrow morning you might see it. And you might see something about, oh, there was a failure. There was an error. Don't worry, it'll retry again. Okay.
Why is that?
This is how it works in real life. It's not just a lab.
No, because that is really headache like when you're doing.
So you've had it in reality, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's really like, even reporting. I've seen it like when different applications, it just doesn't like tells you every picture.
I don't know. I don't think Microsoft knows either, because if they did, they'd fix it. And so some people have told me they've got devices that are configured exactly the same, and they'll have some devices, like one or two devices, where it simply will not install.
Yeah.
And for weeks, it just won't install. But on all the other devices, it installs fine.
Even with autopilot, that your provision devices.
Yeah.
That it can be some days. You don't know like why it's failing.
Yeah. It's strange. Yeah, rebooting sometimes helps as well. Yep. No. So this is different to the curated apps. The curated apps are different. So you're talking about the store apps that you can run on iOS and Android and that. These are different. These are this is the application that actually installs on your computer, so you can use it regardless of whether you're connected to the internet or not. All good, Sunil. Okay, so to do the sign into endpoint admin center, go to your apps, all apps, add, select app type, and what you'll do is you'll select Microsoft 365 app, and go ahead and then so you basically choose what it is you want to install. So maybe I just want Word or Word and Excel, not anything else, and then go ahead and configure it. Other tools available to us for Microsoft 365 app deployment. So other than doing it through Intune, we can do it through Config Manager. So that can be used to prepare and deploy Microsoft 365 apps to devices. Obviously, with Config Manager, it would only be Windows, not Mac OS. There is also the Office deployment tool. So that's a tool you can use. It's basically an Office customization tool, a web-based tool that you can use to customize deployment of your Microsoft 365 apps. That works with the select to run managed Office apps as well. The Office customization tool. And as well as that, an end user can go directly to the 365 portal and install a Microsoft 365 app directly to their device. Yes, I just want to point out a few things that are in your student book but not on the slide over there. Limitations and caveats. So when we are doing our Microsoft 365 app deployment, if any Office apps are open when Intune installs the app suite, then the installation might fail and the users might lose data from unsaved files. So if they already have Word on their computer and they're using Word, and then it goes and tries to do a new installation, there could be problems. So best is everything's all shut down when it installs. Intune does not support installing Microsoft 365 apps from the Microsoft Store, known as Office Centennial Apps, on a device to which you have already deployed Microsoft 365 apps with Intune. If you install this configuration, it might cause data loss or corruption. Okay. Multiple required or available app assignments are not additive. What do they mean by that? So we mentioned over there we might go and set up our deployment so that we install Word and Excel. Then later on I think, I should have added PowerPoint. So you go and do a new deployment for PowerPoint. Well, what does the new deployment say? Well, the new deployment says you don't want Word and Excel anymore because you're just deploying PowerPoint, and it'll actually uninstall your Word and Excel. So it's not additive. What you would have to do is go and create a new deployment with Word, Excel, and PowerPoint to ensure that Word and Excel do not get uninstalled. So that's just something to bear in mind. Okay. This is up to our Microsoft Edge with Internet Explorer mode. What is this all about? So Microsoft Edge, default browser Windows 11 and later. However, you may have older websites or older web apps that require Internet Explorer. So it needs IE version, needs to be opened in IE mode. As we know, Microsoft no longer support Internet Explorer. They don't develop it anymore. So if you try and run Internet Explorer on a later version of Windows, it might not work. It might cause you some problems. So what they've done is instead they've built in this compatibility mode into Edge. So in Edge, you can open up an older website or app in the context of Internet Explorer. So that's all that is. Okay, so I mentioned there in the student book, to overcome the hurdle of supporting legacy web applications, Microsoft Edge introduced a feature called IE mode, making it easy to use all of the sites your organization needs in a single browser. It uses the integrated Chromium engine for modern sites and the Trident MS HTML engine from Internet Explorer 11 for legacy sites. Now, for those of you who have used this in the past, you will remember that Internet Explorer had this anyway. So in our Internet Explorer, we had an IE mode where we could go and use previous versions. So we just always saying over here is now we can use it from a single browser. It has that compatibility support for IE. To enable Internet Explorer mode in Edge using Intune, so we can configure it through Intune. Go to Devices, Windows, Configuration Profiles, select your profile, and then choose which Windows platform to include. And configure your Internet Explorer integration. So once we've gone and enabled our IE mode or enterprise IE mode for Microsoft Edge, we then have to go and create a enterprise mode site list. So my enterprise mode site list will contain those various sites that need to use IE mode. So our computer doesn't know that by itself. We need to tell it. So there's two ways we can do it. There is the enterprise mode site list manager. That is basically a tool that allows us to create XML documents with simple N+1 versioning. So we'd use that if our site is relatively small. And they mentioned there are two versions of the tool. Use the later version, Schema version 2. It is easier to read and provides better foundation for future capabilities. So, for example, when you go and configure your website, you will specify that it opens in IE11. So it's an XML tool. So those funny little tick signs. So the less than arrow, open dash in, close that little bracket. So your right arrow. Let's go. It's easier if we see what it looks like. So, oh, they've taken it out of the new one. It's in the old text, not the new text. It's in here in my old text anyway. So it looks something like this. In goes I11. And then we've got to go and close it out. So I think it is the backslash. So that's basically just our exit out. What is we doing? Opening I11 and closing it out. Then we can also specify the compatibility mode. So it's opening up in the context of our Internet Explorer, but we actually want to use IE7 Enterprise in this case. So we have compat mode. That's mode. Close it out, and what did I say? IE Explorer IE7. IE7. Again, we then go through and close it out, slash and compat. So basically what we're saying is for this particular website, so I'll specify whatever the URL is. I'm going to open it in IE11 in IE7 Enterprise Compatibility. So as soon as we go to that URL, that's what's going to happen. So that's the enterprise mode site list manager. What I should rather do for the guys on the call. Sorry, guys. Let me go zoom in on there for you. There we go. So that's what it looks like there. So URL open in IE11 compatibility mode i7 Enterprise. The other way of doing it is using the Enterprise Mode Site List portal. So that's an open source web tool on GitHub that allows you to manage your Enterprise Mode Site List hosted by the app with multiple users. Obviously, that's for if you've got a big site with lots and lots of different websites, applications, etc., that need to open up in compatibility mode. Okay. And again, we can configure our Microsoft Edge to work with Internet Explorer mode through Intune or through group policy. All right, so I've installed a bunch of apps through Intune, and I want to now go and see what's going on. So my app inventory review. So there are several ways that Intune allow us to go and monitor the compliance status of the apps that we've assigned to users or devices. So we can do this from the apps blade in our Endpoint Manager Admin Center. So if we go to apps overview, that'll list all the apps in Intune and their assignment status. If we go to apps monitor, so we can see over here. So here I'm in the apps blade. So click on apps, shows me the various apps there. App licenses, basically list out the apps with from the Microsoft store or business license information for the apps. They've got a screenshot there in your student book, not on the slides for that. Go to discovered apps. So down here, discovered apps. That'll list all apps discovered by Intune at the last hardware inventory. And again, they got a screenshot of that in your student book. App install status. So list all apps in Intune with user and device failures listed next to the apps. So again, they're showing that there in the student book. That's all good. There's no failures with those. 0 failures with all the stuff that we've got there. Alrighty. Bringing us on to our lab. So how are we going time-wise? Look at that, 10:30. Perfect timing today. We would have been early, actually, if we didn't have all the delays this morning. All right, folks, so we're going to break for morning tea. When we come back from morning tea, deploy cloud app using Intune and configure app protection policies for mobile devices. We used to have lots more